Welcome to part 12 of half bath to full bath conversion. I'm How To Bob, and in this part we're going to get started with some drywall mud. We're going to put a finishing coat on the drywall mud, and when I start with a new bucket, I like to add a little bit of water to the bucket, and then I mix it up thoroughly until I get the consistency that I like. I like it a little bit thinner than what came in the bucket, and I like to get it nice and smooth and creamy, kind of like icing on a cake. And I'm going to start out on the seams that I've already put a coat of the 90-minute mud on, and I'm going to spread out my seam. I'll use a 12-inch knife and go along the seam and basically feather out the seam as far as I can to make it nice and smooth. And I'll generally put a lot of mud on the wall with a 4-inch knife and then come back with my 12-inch knife and smooth it over and kind of spread out all the mud that I put on the wall with the 4-inch knife, trying to feather it in to the existing walls and the drywall that I just installed. Make sure I cover all of the screw heads while I'm here, and then I can just keep smoothing over the drywall till it gets where I want it. Nice smooth coat of drywall mud. I work in the corners. I start all the way up at the top and draw my 12-inch knife down, and that'll usually give me a nice square corner, as square as it can be. And I just put it as close to the corner as I can and draw it out. Also want to feather out this seam on the ceiling. I'll be able to texture this once this coat dries. You can see I've got all the ceiling feathered in now. There's a little bit of spot here and there that needs to be worked, but I've got all the seams in the ceiling one coated. So I'll start working on some of the ceiling seams, spreading them out a little bit. Work from the corner again here so that I get a nice squared off corner. And my goal is to not sand at all. Never works. However, if you shoot for that goal, just means that there'll be less sanding that you have to do once you get the final coat on. So I found that less is better. You can always add more mud, but to take the mud off, you have to sand it. So I'll do several thin coats rather than one thick coat. I'll start thick like that, and then I'll smooth it over and take a lot of it off there. I just want to get a nice smooth edge from my old part to my new part. And I'll knock down any of the tool marks that I can that are real big. So I've got that section done. I'll move on to the corner section over here, and you can see there's parts here that need to be scraped off on the corner from the first coat. So I'll just take a 4-inch knife and go along the corner beads and any of the tool marks I see on the surface and just knock those off. No need to sand yet. And then I'll get everything as smooth as can be, and then I'll get my mud and just put some on the wall, and then I can use my 12-inch knife to smooth it out. I like to work the mud in two different directions. One to get it smoothed out and the other one to keep it straight so there's not such a bow in the wall. And using a 12-inch knife is a good way to keep it from bowing, having a low spot in the middle, and you can fill that in with mud. A little bit of a taper is not bad, but a big bow in the wall would be pretty visible once it's completed. There's going to be a lot of obstacles here I'll have a cabinet here, so you won't even see it if there is a little bit of a bow. So in this area, it's not too important to keep the bow out, but in a normal wall, you don't want, you know, that kind of seam. So I'm just going to put some mud on the wall with my 4-inch knife here again, get all the way up against the cabinet, and then use my 12-inch knife to smooth it out from the cabinet over to the edge. Put a little bit next to the switch, and I'll add a little bit of mud up against the soffit, and I'll pull that out, and I can go all the way up to the ceiling, adding more mud to the wall. And I'll use my 12-inch knife and take it down to a nice smooth surface. It helps having the mud thinned out a little bit, lets it spread onto the wall a lot smoother. So that's why I add the water at the beginning and mix it thoroughly. You could use it straight out of the bucket, however, it would not end up as smooth as it does. This makes it a lot easier to apply. It makes it a lot smoother to put on. I'm going to keep my corner here. Try to keep it nice and square in the corner, and I'll just put a little bit of mud there, and then I can come down again with my 12-inch from the ceiling corner, and I'll keep my corner on the right hand side of the wall here and continue down. I just keep working it until it gets as smooth as I want. That way there's very little sanding left for me to do. Now to work around the switch, I have to use a smaller knife to get in the corner, and I'll use my 4-inch, and once I get past there I can go back to my 12-inch knife. So when I'm working a wall, I'll usually work from the top down or the bottom up and meet in the middle. That way I can get the corner at the ceiling or the corner at the wall nice and smooth. So I'll work all the way down to the bottom and then work my way back up. So we'll go inside the bathroom here and work from the ceiling down across the header of the door. I'm going to work out of the ceiling here just to keep my corner nice and square, and then I'll start working off the wall to keep that corner nice and tight and smooth all the way across the header. Then I can go all the way down my door frame. So we've got a good coat of drywall mud on the whole area that we've done, both outside the bathroom and inside the bathroom. I had to remove the lights here to get all around the lights, but those are easy enough to reinstall. Got the ceilings tapered in, all the walls done to the floor. All that's left to do is wait for it to dry. So we're back, and all the drywall mud's dry, and you can see the tool marks that are left. So I'll just take a 4-inch knife and go along the tool marks and scrape those down. It beats sanding, so it'll help out the sanding process. And I'm going to mix some mud. I'm going to mix it really thin, and I'm going to use this to texture my ceiling. So I've left a little bit of mud in the bucket, and I'm adding a lot of water and mixing it up. And I'm going to use a texture roller. This is called a crow's foot texture roller. You can see it's like a sponge, and I'll use that to texture my ceiling. But before I use that, I want to put the mud that I just thinned out all over the ceiling and give it a nice, fairly thick coat, because I need this surface to be even with the textured surface that's already on the ceiling in the spots that I did not replace. So the goal is to match this with the surface that's already finished. So with my texture roller, I want to get that wet first. It just helps the mud not to stick to the roller. And with the mud on the ceiling, I just take my roller and simply go along the wall. And you can see it's starting to come out with a little bit of texture. as I go across. It may not be exactly what I was looking for the first time through, but you can see it is starting to get that kind of pattern in the mud that's on the ceiling, and I'll work it back and forth several times. You have a little bit of time to work with this until the mud starts setting up, so if it's not exactly how I want it the first time, I can go back over it. I can even try different directions, and I'm going to kind of extend it over the old ceiling, and I'll keep going over it until I get it where I want it to be. And I got this small section here where the wall used to be. Got that mudded, so I'll run my texture roller over that. I'll run it one way, then I'll run it the other way. And once I get done, I can take a small tool, 4-inch knife or something, and feather in the patterns from the old ceiling to the new ceiling just to kind of blend it together. You can see it's coming together pretty good. It's going to be a little different color, but I'll take care of that in a little bit. So I've got my ceilings all finished. I can start working on the walls, knock down some of the tool marks that I have from my previous coat of mud. Work on the corners, knock off all the corners and any of the tool marks left. I just like to do this because all the tool marks would be dust if I were to sand every tool mark off of every wall. So I will just use my 4-inch knife. I've got a 4-inch knife that's not real sharp, so it doesn't dig into the mud as much, but it does scrape the tool marks off. So while my ceilings are drying, my walls are finished, I can start working on the grout in the floor. And I want to take a look at the grout. I'll show you what we have here. You can see some variations. This is the old grout, so it's going to vary from place to place. There's a lot of staining going on and dark and light spots. So I picked a lighter grout and I'm going to mix that up. And I like it to be a little bit thicker, so when I lift the bucket up and tap it, it kind of falls into place, because I can always add more water once I'm working it into the grout lines. And I'll use my grout float, and you can see I like to push the grout into the grout lines and force it down in there and go across the grout lines in a diagonal fashion. That way the grout float does not pick the grout out of the grout lines. And I'll smear the grout all around all of my grout lines, working it in, making sure that it gets down into the grout lines thoroughly. And I'll go across the surface and get most of the grout off. There's a spot along the shower base here. I'm going to fill that in with grout all the way down, clean that off. And once I'm done putting a little bit of grout in, I'll come back with a wet sponge. And I like to first off smear over the whole surface. That gets a nice smooth edge along the grout. Don't want to push too hard to remove any of the grout, but I want to go over the whole surface area just to make sure that all the grout is smooth, and it'll actually keep the grout feathered into the tile nice and smooth. And then I'll wipe down along the tub, rinse out the sponge, and repeat several times. As a matter of fact, several times for the rinsing and repeat. And I'll go out into the main area. And this grout may not match exactly at first, but with some time and traffic, it will. Or we can always stain the grout if it doesn't match to our satisfaction. And we can take a look at what we've got done here with the floor. So all the grout's in, walls are ready, waiting for the ceiling to dry. So we will be back in part 13 of half bath to full bath. I'm How To Bob. Thanks for watching.